Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, a fascinating new study on the gender pay gap of Uber drivers. What makes Uber an interesting case study is that the pay of the drivers is determined by a computer algorithm that factors in the distance of the ride, the time it took to get to the destination, and a surge multiplier if rides are in high demand, meaning the more people who are asking for rides, the higher the price. And that's it. The app does not tell you whether your potential driver is a male or a female. Uber says their app doesn't factor gender into their algorithm at all. So in theory, there should be no pay gap between male and female drivers if the reason for the gender pay gap in general is sexism and discrimination against women, which is what liberals tell us it is about. But guess what this study actually found? With me now, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, Christina Hoff-Summers. Christina, thanks for joining me.
Oh, nice to be here.
All right, Christina, talk to me about this study. So just to back up for 1 second, the premise of this study was that the flexibility in hours, the fact that Uber drivers can pick when they want to work, how long they want to work, when it's convenient, where they want to drive, because of that flexibility, the premise of this study was that it would eliminate any gender pay gap that had to do with choice, correct?
That's right.
And that's not exactly what they found. This is the most fascinating part. Their major conclusion was that there is still a gender pay gap between male and female drivers of 8%. How come?
Well, as you said, they eliminated the possibility of discrimination. There's just no place for it because as it's done by an algorithm that's not sexist. It's based on how many rides you have and how many miles you drive. So then they thought it could be the shifts. And it's true, men drive lucrative shifts late at night, but women dominate another equally lucrative shift, which is Sundays, Sunday afternoons. Maybe men are watching football, I'm not sure, but women compensated for that. So what could it be? In the end, it turned out to be three things. One is the men on average had slightly more experience, but that was just a small part of the gap. They took they went to more lucrative neighborhoods, but the biggest difference was that the men drove faster.
Right, that's absolutely crazy to me. It's crazy to me. Well, it debunks a couple of things here, first of all. It debunks the idea that the gender pay gap is based on institutional sexism, basically a chauvinistic male boss saying, oh, you little girl, you don't deserve to be paid as much as your male counterparts. That's not what this is at all, because the managers at Uber or the app has nothing to do with gender. These drivers aren't selected at all based off of whether they're male or female. But the experience part, talk to me a little bit about that, because that's one of the things, that's one of the points I always make when we're talking about the gender pay gap in general, that women tend to be paid less even if they have the same role in an organization as men, because men have been working either longer hours or years longer, depending on how long women have taken off for childbirth. What does that mean for Uber drivers? How would the algorithm factor that in at all?
Well, the more experience you have, you probably know the routes better. You're just more efficient. And as you said, when we look at the pay gap, often we hear women earn 73 cents for every dollar a man earns for the same work. But most economists will tell you we don't really know if it's for the same work, because first, it's not a 23-cent gap. You have to factor in education, workplace, hours worked per week. When you do all those controls, what's interesting is that almost everyone comes up with a little bit of a gap, maybe between 5 and 9 cents. Uber came up with 8 cents. Now, a lot of economists will say, well, we think that's discrimination, but we're not sure. Well, Uber came up with the 8%. It's not doesn't appear to have anything to do with discrimination. It's a slightly different way of behaving on the job.
Right, so what does this tell us? Perhaps that men and women inherently behave a little bit differently based off of their gender differences?
Well, it may be. One interesting thing is Uber has recently introduced a more easy way to give a tip. As this becomes more a part of the service, that might close the gap because women get tipped more on average.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's kind of this is one thing I've been arguing for years, is that too much the feminist establishment gets carried away with some faux statistic. They will not give up. They will not correct it. It gets out there in the media chamber, echo chamber, and we always hear women are second-class citizens in the workplace. No, they're not. They do earn less. Let's find out why, and then find some intelligent ways to correct it if it's correctable. Uber, this is a marvelous study, it was a very rare opportunity. It was 5 economists just had this data set, and they realized it was a great opportunity to learn about men and women in the workplace. So this is, I think, tells the truth. There's no spin, fudging the data. We see too much of that. There's too much advocacy research. So I think it's a very exciting.
Right, I can't think offhand of any other company or any other industry, any other area where you could actually get data like this, because it's not factoring human biases into it. It is just a computer algorithm. So unless liberal feminists want to sit there and say, listen, this computer might have been coded by a man, maybe it's inherently sexist just in and of itself, I don't know how they could possibly argue that. And that brings it to the next point. A story like this, or a study like this, I should say, lets me know, at least, that the gender pay gap is not based off of sexism. It's not. But at what point is that going to be, I guess, become mainstream? At what point are liberal feminists going to accept any of this? And is this going to be the impetus that starts that?
It's possible, but I'm very worried about this. There's so much misinformation, or misinformation, if you can bear the pun. So much misinformation, myth information, some call it. I have a weekly, well, ideally, a weekly video program called The Factual Feminist, in which I correct feminist myths. Because I do not think women are helped by misinformation. We need truth, we need honesty, and then we see what we can do. But we have a feminist establishment that's very invested in sort of victim statistics and always blaming men or blaming the patriarchy. But what if it's just simply, as you said, differences between men and women? We'll have to think about that.
Right.
You know?
It's amazing to see this, that the reason that men earn 8% more is primarily, the major factor here is that they drive faster. I mean, I guess it makes sense. All you have to do is look at the insurance companies. Everyone knows that when your kid starts to drive, your 16, 17-year-old son pays a huge premium compared to your 16 or 17-year-old daughter, because men typically drive more recklessly and drive faster than women do. So I don't know why it would be any different here. Christina, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.